It's all yours, Doug.
Mr. Lemansky,
Yes.
you going to read this?
Let me see this. Again, our administrators handed me a document to where, under the rule of necessity, because of members who have sewer that goes to their homes, it may be a conflict, and the statement is, as a result of the disqualification of 3 of the 5 commissioners due to a conflict of interest, and commissions lacks a sufficient number of members needed to take a valid vote, but town council has advised that the commission is the only body with legal authority to make such decisions. As a last resort, all commissioners so disqualified may now participate under the so-called rule of necessity. Okay. And I might add is that rule of necessity, the way that our town council, Mr. Cosgrove, had applied it, is that with 600 and some odd connections based on 2.1 people, we had less than 10% of the population, and that's why this rule of necessity is necessary. So, with that said, we're going to move forward. So, Doug, if you would please.
Okay, thank
Sir.
you.
The commissioners each have a statement that they're supposed to read relative to acknowledging the fact that they are in conflict, and
Okay, if that's what the rule is, or that's what you're saying is, I know I may disagree with that because I don't think the population was properly counted. But Alex, are you connected to sewer?
Nope.
Okay,
Jen is,
Jen is.
you are, Paul. I don't
Yeah.
think Gabe is.
So, I'd like to state for the record, I have Jen Harwich Vaughn, I have a conflict of interest because property which I own would be affected by the rates under consideration. However, for the reasons declared by the chair, I am invoking the rule of necessity and will participate in the discussion, making process, and vote.
Fine, let's move on. Doug, it's all yours.
Okay, third time's the charm.
Your time.
Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Doug Gardner. My company is Pioneer Consulting, and I specialize in water and sewer rates, primarily throughout the Commonwealth. I was hired by the town several months ago to conduct a sewer rate study and also an indirect cost study. And I'm here tonight to discuss the results of that study. I'm pretty easy to work with. If you have questions, you can ask as we're going along, or if you prefer to hold them until the end of my presentation, it's really up to you. So I'll just proceed and we can just kind of go from there. So I'm actually not going to start on page 1. What I would like to do is start on page 2 of your handout. And the handout that I provided, this is the cover page. I believe Norma gave you a copy. So what you have in front of you is a graph and a table showing the certified retained earnings for the sewer enterprise account. And you can see from the start of fiscal 13 until today, it's been a pretty steady and rapid decline in the amount of your certified retained earnings. The way this works is that the retained earnings are certified by the Department of Revenue at the end of the year once the audit is complete and once the accountant submits all the necessary paperwork. So the estimate as of 7/1/2017 is $122,000, but that number will climb once the audit is complete and once the town accountant submits her calculations to the state or to the Commonwealth, and then the Department of Revenue will then certify that number. So until then, you really have you have no certified retained earnings at this point. But you don't need them right now, so it's not a big deal. It's more of a procedural thing. But the trend is, it's going in the wrong direction. If you want to think of your retained earnings as your savings account, you've been depleting your savings account every year. At the most recent town meeting in May, there was more than $500,000 appropriated for various projects and to reduce rates for fiscal 2018. So part of my analysis was to look at the retained earnings, see the trend that it was moving in, and then incorporate those results into the rate study. One of the goals of my analysis is not just to come up with rates to fund the budget for the current year or even into next year, but it's to strengthen the overall health of the enterprise fund. And part of a healthy enterprise fund is the certified retained earnings. So that's going to factor into my analysis. So I'm going to be,
If I may, Doug?
Yes,
Does
of
any
course.
members have any comments just on this portion here? If we're going to do portion by portion? Is that okay?
sure, whatever you'd like.
Okay, I've got some questions, and I hear exactly what you're saying as far as the certified funds, because what that means is that other parties have come out and said, this is what the balance is in our account. So in year 2012, it was $1,018,000. 2013, $1,222,000. 2014, $1,118,000. 2015, $930,000. And between those years, it seemed like there was about a $100,000 drop. And then we get to 2016. And I know that raised an eyebrow for myself. And with a little research, and as commissioners know, that's the year that we only had 3/4 of income, because we had a billing cycle that was pushed out, and we knew about it, and we were told about it, that it's going to get bumped into the following year. And on an average billing cycle, which is about, so that 630 really should be 855. Because what's happening in 2017, instead of there being 4 billing cycles of income, there's going to be 5 billing cycles. So, and that's why when I see the 122, that's like, no,
Well, that number is going to come up, but until it's certified by DOR, I'm not prepared to put anything in
I understand the
writing.
word certified, but when I talked to our town accountant today, and I said to her, without going too far out on a plank, what's our cash position in our account right now? That was my question to
Oh, your
her.
cash position is fine. There's a difference between your cash position and your certified retained earnings.
Of course there is. I totally agree with you, okay? But if on the surface, Doug, looking at this, and I see 2017 estimated retained earnings of $122,000. And then when I talk to our town accountant and saying, look, you know, what's our cash position? Knowing, and this is only my math. In our account, I know for myself, I look at it from a position that we actually have 2 pots. We have one pot that's operational. We have the other pot that's loans and betterments and privilege fees. That's the income, and then the loans and debt service is what goes out. So when we look at what we have for our operating costs, and it usually runs somewhere around $900,000 to $1 million a year. And so that's what we need to bring in with our sewer fees, and also our additional fees that we charge. So when I said to the town accountant, you know, can you give me an idea of retained earnings? Because I can't give you an idea of retained earnings, because we got to get the state to come in and certify. Okay, certify. I says, how much cash we got on hand? I believe, this is what she told me. I wrote it down here. I believe it's $2.1 million. That's what's in our account.
Yeah.
So if I'm an outside party and I'm reading this, I'm saying, this is a car crash here. This is a multi-car crash going from 2 years ago at 933,000 down to 122. So from my point of view is, I'm not accepting these numbers here. Because I think what needs to happen is this, especially the 2016 number, and I don't know when, or how soon is the certification going to come in for
Yeah,
last
usually it's
fiscal?
November, December, somewhere in that
Okay,
range.
but I think one can make a pretty fair assumption that if, I said to Norma and Steve, what was that quarter that was pushed out into the next fiscal year? What was that amount of money that was billed? Because wherever it was billed, it's going to be pure income, because we've already taken all the expenses off. So if they tell me it's $225,000, then that $630,000 on July 2016 moves up to $855.
Doesn't work that way.
Mr. Lemansky,
But,
can,
no, you're interrupting me, please, okay? I'm
I
having
was
a
asking
discussion
if
with
I
you.
can interrupt, I'm sorry.
Okay, hold on for a second while I got this. Is it, again, I'm just using paperboy math here, all right? Is that, look, the expenses have already been charged off. But what lacked was the income. The income for that one whole quarter got pushed out of this fiscal year into the next fiscal year. So that build-out income was not included in the end results of the 633. So if we were to go, and we know what that number is just by doing a little bit of research, we'd take that 225 for analysis' sake and put it back into this fiscal year of 2016, and that would take our number of 630 and move it up to 855. Tell me where I'm going off track.
Well, it doesn't work that way with accounting.
Please, Jen, I'll be right with you.
The 630,000 is what was certified by the state as of the beginning of, at the end of fiscal 16. There was $530,000 appropriated at the town meeting in May. So that reduces that 630,000 down to the 122,246.
Yep.
Now, at the end of the fiscal year, that 122,246 is wiped out. It goes to zero. So your free, just let me finish,
Yep.
please. Your free cash right now is zero until it is certified by the Department of Revenue. Now, it will become, it starts off with the balance of 122,246, and then they take what your income, what your revenues were, less what your expenses are, encumbrances, anything that was paid from a prior year, all gets factored into that. And then at the end of November, December, whenever the certification comes out, you will now have a new certified retained earnings. Let's, just for an example, say it's $300,000. You can then use that money at your next town meeting to appropriate for capital improvements or whatever you feel you need to. But until that point, you don't go back and amend a prior year's balance, like a balance from 2016. It just gets added to the current total, is the way that will work.
The end result for 2017, because you've got this estimate here, the estimate
That's the
of 122.
122, but I did state that that number would go up. But I'm not prepared to put in
And
writing
I
what
think-
that number is going to go to, because nobody knows.
Nobody knows, or nobody knows exactly what it's going to be.
Nobody knows exactly what
But-
that number is going to be.
But does anybody have a good estimate of what it's going to be?
Ballpark estimate,
A
yes.
ballpark is, because when I look at our expenditures from year to year, they're almost identical when we go on to page 4.
Can I speak
of-
before we go
of-
on to page
of-
4, please,
of every-
Mr.
We're
Lemansky?
still talking about adding and subtracting. Hold on, Jen, please. So we're talking about an average of 1 million and some change that we spend each year. And also what we do know is we're billing, depending on the year, and one of the things that has an impact on our billing is that people who have gone from Title V onto meter, that has cost a steady reduction, and that's part of the reduction of probably about $100,000 a year out of our
Yes, I'm
retained
aware of
earnings. Okay? So the 122,000 is just an unacceptable, unrealistic number that's been put on this page that I don't think is at all fair.
It's not, with all respect, it's not unrealistic, it's the actual number. It's the actual number that, if you looked at your certified retained earnings, that is the number as of the end of fiscal 17. So June 30, 2000.
16, that only had 5 quarters.
2017.
Only had 3 quarters of billing.
A month ago.
That
As
only
of-
had 3 quarters of billing in it. Yeah,
You don't accrue that money for,
okay, all right, because.
it gets counted in the current year, not in the prior year.
Because in general, what I don't want to see this commission do is overreact to that number of the 122. There needs to be a reaction to the information, but not an overreaction. Yes, Jim?
Okay, so, I'm sorry if I interrupted you,
No, no, it's
but
okay, fine.
basically what I was gonna say is, this is what's currently correct as far as I know. Now, it's gonna be amended, so what it sounds like you're asking is that you want some, like, little notes that 2016 was only 3 periods, and 2017 was only estimated to this, but it will increase. They can't determine the correct amount, but it could be anywhere from here to here. But you can't, I don't think that you can amend this, because this is what it actually
No,
is.
and I agree. I am not trying to amend it, and I think
Well, that's
that's a perfect analysis of the 2016, the 630,000, is that was only 3.
right.
Okay, so, but it doesn't say that here anyway, it doesn't say in the base note, it doesn't say anyway. So if in fact you didn't know what we know from sitting here, meeting after meeting, that's why I say that, since this is a draft, Doug, I think that note should probably be put in there, that the 633, when that was certified, that was based on only three billing periods and not 4? Do you think that's fair?
No, I don't, because
Because
this
why?
is the actual certified number from the Department of Revenue. And if somebody goes back in 5 years or 10 years and wants to compare the number, it's off.
Yeah, Doug, do not change the number. I'm not saying change the number. I'm saying just exactly what Ms. Vaughn said over here. It needs an asterisk.
Then you're gonna need to put another asterisk in fiscal 17
Exactly.
to show that it's too high because it's making up for fiscal 16.
No, because I don't think 17 has all the income in it. It can't have all the income. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible that we spent that kind of money. Impossible.
It's not impossible. You appropriated at the annual town meeting in May, 500 and some odd $1,000. I have
Right.
the article
Yeah, there's a
somewhere in
difference
here.
between appropriated and spent. Because on an annual basis, in fact, do you have it there on an annual basis of how much money we return each year?
That's all part of the retained earning, the certified retained earning at the end of the fiscal year.
Correct, but what you don't have the exact number. For instance, Steve, at the end of each year, what we have budgeted and what we've spent in past years, that number's gone from $150,000 to $250,000.
Correct.
So, and I'm not saying we're trying to abuse the system by over-budgeting, but Again, as long as the commissioners understand it here, is that this number here is, should be taken into consideration, but should be given the proper weight, knowing all the information. Because I don't want us making decisions on a number that really that doesn't show how it's really gonna come out. And maybe we're gonna have to wait till November, but anyways. All right, Jen, anything else?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you need, but the way that you explained it is, okay, so this is like a bank account. So my bank account shows X amount of dollars. I can't say in 3 months, I'm gonna have X amount because it was appropriated. What happens if something happens? These are the realistic numbers. If you want an addendum or a little note or something, then we would have to make a motion to ask him for that, is the way that I look at it. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Lemansky, and I agree, when you look at the numbers, it looks really scary. So what do you propose that you are looking for?
I am fine with this, with the 2017 estimate number, the 122. It doesn't need to be changed, that's an estimate.
Okay.
Okay, and the 2016 number, I'm not proposing to change it, but all I'm saying is from your suggestion, put an asterisk on it, that it represented 3 quarters of billing. That's all.
And, I think we would also need to say, as you referenced, that this is what is recorded as in the Department of Revenue.
I think that's stated by its heading, certified retained earnings, certified. And this is why Mr. Gardner is very specific with his language, is certified. In other words, he didn't come up with these numbers. These numbers came out of the state's certified. So we have to live with those numbers. That's agreed upon. I have not have a problem. I don't think there needs for anything else to be done.
Move on.
Agreed.
Okay. This chart was just to show you that we're trending in the wrong direction. And it's all gonna be part of the reason why we're looking at what I would describe as a fairly significant rate increase. So this is up as to why I'm gonna be recommending a rate increase to you tonight. So if we want to jump over to page 4, this is the three-year average budget for the department. So the rates that I'm going to recommend will likely support the enterprise fund for the next 3 fiscal years. Maybe 2, but we're hoping for 3. A lot of it will depend on how many Title V accounts convert over to metered accounts. Because generally when they switch over, it does not benefit the enterprise fund. It's a reduction in revenue versus an increase in revenue. I would like to see all accounts removed from Title V. I would like to see every account be based on metered consumption. What's going to happen is it will result in higher rates, but you'll have a much more fair and equitable rate system. Everybody will be charged based on the same method, that is a metered sewer rate. Right now, you have some customers that pay far more than if they were on the metered account, and you probably have a couple that are in the opposite of that as well. But the only fair way to come up with what your true cost of treating the water or treating the wastewater is to be on a metered rate. So that's something I would like to see you. It's probably not something that we need to discuss in too much detail tonight, because my analysis does not include a completely flow-based rate. It's based on the Title V and the flow, but it's something that should be discussed as we move on through the fiscal year and in the next couple fiscal years. So The 3-year average rate is, I took your budget for fiscal 2018 and projected out the cost for fiscal 2019, fiscal 2020 and estimated them as best I can, as best I could. And if you'll look down at the very bottom of the budget, the second to last line, there's a line called reserves. That is money that will be, or revenue that will be generated that won't be spent and will be designed to build up the certified retained earnings at the end of the fiscal year. This is all part of proper rate making and proper enterprise administration. And it's a small number, $25,000 each year. The big number in this budget is the capital. That is $385,000 per year, so for each year. And of course, your debt, you're very heavy with debt, about $840,000 on average over the next 3 years for each year. So large amount of principal and smaller amount of interest.
If I may, Doug, for a second here, is when we take a look at the debt service, because of betterments and privilege fees, all of the debt service, whether it's money coming in from our ratepayers who are also paying the betterment, or the property owners that are paying the betterment, this really is something in on its own, because it really takes care of itself.
To some extent, it does.
And has little or no impact on our budget.
Well,
at this time.
I believe that you should show the expenses at 100%, and you should show all revenue that comes in on the revenue schedule. So I've actually, I have a line item in my, what I call my proof of revenue, and that's gonna be on page 6, the last page.
Yeah,
Second column, or second set of income down, you'll see there's other fees, general fund transfer, you have your fund balance privilege fees, and your betterments. So there's roughly $500,000, a little bit more, in income to offset that debt. So not the full amount, but about 2/3 of it would be, not all of it, about 2/3 of it.
no, two-thirds of it based on the balance, or 2/3 of the annual income?
2/3 of the debt for fiscal 18.
Yeah,
So if your debt is
835.
35, approximately 500,000 of that it will be offset by betterments and privilege fees.
And then you're telling us the 300,000,
Is covered in the rates, is paid for either through, some of it may be covered through that general fund transfer, which is up above, that's 338,000.
my understanding of those transfers were the transfers was coming from monies that were already in reserve in the betterment privilege fee account.
It's 338,000 will come from the general fund transfer. That's, the town accountant explained it to me, is that it's a preset formula that you take your debt, you take away your privilege fees, you take away your betterments, and the balance is what the general fund will contribute to the sewer enterprise fund.
Really, if I may. excuse me.
That's how it was explained to me by
Right, but
Mrs.
that-
Walker.
My problem is I've been here a little bit too long, but Steve, I don't ever recall us having to fund the debt in our annual budget, that the debt was always part of, that was in another room or another box, to where the income was always there, and the balance was there, always to cover our debt service. We never had to concern ourselves with debt within our budget.
In the year that I got expenses out of the treasurer, he listed debt on both the indirect costs and the sheet showing us how he did his computations.
Which is what's shown here.
Yes.
But on the top half of the sheet, okay, because I wish this sheet would have shown fiscal year 15, 16, and 17 as far as what we spent, as far as what our budget was. Because I think our budget annually is on this top half, not the bottom half, the top half. Usually, you know, it's right around that $1 million mark. Agreed?
Yes.
And that all of this other stuff was carried. And also, Steve, if we're gonna carry capital improvements on an annual basis of $385,000, if we were to look back 3 years, did we spend $1,155,000 on capital improvements? I don't think so. No. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, hey, look, we're in rosy shape here, but what I'm saying here is this, Doug, I think this picture needs a little bit of fine tuning here, at least from a point of view of what we've been doing, and also as far as what income is available to us at this point in time. So, and, because what you're doing here is with the capital improvements in the reserve, that you're adding $410,000 a year to the $1 million. So now we've gone from $1 million up to $1,410,000.
410.
The 410,000 is the 385 plus the 25,000, at the next to the last two lines, capital improvements in reserves.
Okay.
Yeah, so that 410 really, it's not part of our debt service to where that should be taking care of itself because of the fee money that's paid and also in reserve.
The capital number, that 335,000, that was the number that was provided to me by Steve, and that was to be incorporated, or 385, excuse me, that was to be incorporated into the rate study. And that was money that needed to be reinvested into the plant and into the infrastructure.
I hear what you're saying, but it's not necessarily, or it hasn't been in years past, a hard number. In fact, one time we almost spent twice that on one item, but it's because they were expensive items down there, and I'm not saying we shouldn't plan for it, or as far as a reserve fund.
No, it's not a hard number at this point. It's strictly a projection for fiscal 19 and 20. But I believe it's a realistic number. It could be higher, and if it's higher, then you may need to appropriate more money from retained earnings, or you may need to raise your rates again.
Yep.
But it's a number that was provided to me. I didn't make it up. It's
Oh,
provided.
no, I understand.
And I'm not
your
getting
job and what you
defensive.
do.
I'm just simply trying to
Yeah, yeah.
explain
Yeah,
how I came up with that number. And through discussions with Steve, the amount of money that needs to be invested down at the plant, it seems like this, little over $1 million is a drop in the bucket of what needs to be invested. The plant has not had a tremendous amount of capital invested in it over the last few years. And the time has come, and because we have a formalized rate study, now it's the time to build that into the budget and start planning for it. The longer we defer this, the more it's going to cost.
Mr. Chair, I
So-
got a couple questions, if I could.
sure, let's go right ahead.
Steve, when was the last time we had a rate study done? And that was
July.
done and
It was
implemented as a...
July 2008. The study started in 2007, culminated in mid-2008.
Oh, wait. And was that just a one-time hike, or is it over a course?
That was a one-time hike.
That was the last time we had a hike?
So it was 9 years ago.
9 years. So how often do you think a rate study should be done and implemented?
Really depends on the community. Small growing communities generally have to raise their rates maybe a little more frequently, unless the community's really growing and you're adding, scores of new customers each year, then the revenue that will come in will far exceed the amount of expenses to treat that amount of water. So that would actually buy you some time but I would say in your short term, you're gonna need to look at raising the rate several times in the next 5 years. Because you haven't had a rate increase in almost 10 years. Each year you don't raise the rate, you fall further and further and further behind. And I believe that smaller annual increases are far more effective and far more affordable for the public than a rate increase every 3 years or every 5 years or every 10 years. I'm giving you a rate that's gonna be good for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
A lot could change in that time. You're a small community, you are gonna be adding some new customers. But you have a lot of capital as well. So there are a lot of moving parts at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of whacking capital that hasn't been approved in a long time with the plant
Correct.
and through the system. As far as I was looking through some of your numbers, your increases on MTA rates.
Mhm.
How did you come up with those, if you don't mind me asking? Is that on the cost that is to treat, or was it?
Those numbers weren't readily available. It's an estimate.
Okay.
I was very cognizant of not raising that number too high, because the customers that are the MTA customers are also metered sewer customers. So they're gonna see a large increase there, and I didn't feel it would be appropriate to hit those customers twice, for lack of a better term.
Steve, do we have any numbers of how many people convert from?
Going back to 2008, we had 50 to 100 customers, probably 75, that were actually metered. Today, we're closer to 300, so it's about a half. So over the course of 2008, mid-2008 to now,
9
we-
years,
we've had,
which isn't a lot of customers converting.
it's 200, roughly 250 customers have gone from the fixed rate to the,
What's that, 28, 29 customers a year?
yeah,
Average?
it's six, yeah.
How much of an impact do you think that's had on our revenue?
I would say significant.
Yeah.
Over the 9 years,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
but like when
But
when
annually,
the Masonic home converted from a
That was huge.
bedroom
Yeah.
to a metered rate, they're saving a tremendous amount of
Yep.
money.
it was huge for them.
And because you're a small system and you have a small budget, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 is a large percentage of your total budget, so it has a greater effect. Just you don't have the customer base to spread that increase or
Right.
that deficiency over. That's why I stated at the beginning of my presentation that I would like to see you move over to a total metered rate for all customers. That way, it's fair. Those who use the most will pay the most, those who use the least will pay the
It would be a
least.
tiered structure similar to a water bill, water usage.
Yeah, you'd want to take your time getting there.
No,
I think
but-
you'd want to maintain a single-step rate for at least a year or two,
Okay.
until you can determine what the consumption is of your customer base. And then you could move to a multi-step rate, probably a two-step rate.
The meter purchase line, that seems kind of low. Is that Steve's number? Oh, all right, so that's something you're just carrying through, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you on page 4?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I took,
Last line of expenses.
the 10,000,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that just came off the fiscal 18 budget.
That just got pulled.
Sure, if you believe it needs to be higher, we can amend that number.
And do we have any estimates of what the EQ pumps and all that is at? Roughly? You don't have to-
That's factored into the capital budget.
Right.
That was part of the number that made the 385.
Okay,
It
that's
was,
what I thought.
yes, it was included in there.
Okay.
that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we have our 3-year average budget, around $2.3 million. If we turn to page 5, this is the breakdown of the debt service for the sewer enterprise. And there are 4 notes. Average principal is around $780,000 for the 3 years. Average interest is around $40,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So, a little over $800,000, $825,000 per year just for debt service. But that number is offset by privilege fees, betterments, and your general fund contribution. So if we,
Excuse me, Doug, 1 second. On these obligations, what's the maturity date on these things? When are they gonna be retired? Because I see down here, you've got 3 of them with 0 interest in year 2020.
okay, one of the last bond that has principal of, the middle one, of 166,000.
Oh, in year
That,
220, yeah.
So that is gonna be the second note, so that's the one with an issue date of 10/6/99,
Yeah,
3.6 million. That one is going to mature at the end of fiscal 2020, so 2021 will be the
that'll
first year
retired.
without any principal.
Okay. And then the next 2 down from that? Because when you go 0, you've got 0 interest in 2020. Those as well will be retired? It makes sense as far as their dates go.
They expire in 2021, so a year later,
A year later.
a year later.
So in 2022, the only debt we're gonna have,
Is that one note of
112.
117,000 and roughly 24,000 in interest,
Right, but,
so about 140,000.
okay, in my room, again, because that's part of that debt service, betterment's privilege, it's really not gonna have an effect on our.
Won't have a large effect, no. One should run out at the same time as
Right,
the other.
but, because I think what we were saying earlier, you had spoken of probably a $300,000
Yes. and I bel-
vacuum here between,
Well, that's the general fund contribution, so that will
Right.
dry up as well. Right now, each year, the town appropriates from their tax base, their tax dollars that they bring in, or
yep,
a certain amount of money to cover the debt that isn't funded by the privilege fees or the betterments. So once those instruments mature, the general fund subsidy will decrease as well.
Right.
So it's gonna be a wash.
bear with me for a second here, Doug. I was always under the impression that if here, we're gonna do a water or sewer project, that whatever the proposed amount is, that amount, we have to distribute it fairly amongst those who are gonna be benefited, thus giving us the betterment charge. And we can't charge, the rule is you can't charge any more than what the project costs. There's no making money off betterments. If
Correct.
the project costs $100 and you got 10 people, everyone pays $10. So that's why I can't understand why there is a deficiency if in fact, when these loans were set up, that it was already laid out what properties were gonna be benefited, and it was already divided out. And also, if anything, because of the privilege fee factor, there were some properties that weren't considered that later on asked for it. So that's where the privilege fee comes, which then adds on to the income. Doesn't take it away, adds on.
I don't know all the details into how your numbers were calculated 20 years ago or whenever it was,
Yeah,
but
that was,
there are costs that you cannot recoup through the betterment, so that may factor into it.
okay.
I don't know that for a fact,
Well,
but that would
yeah,
be,
yeah.
that would be my assumption.
I know on the outstanding loan that was, I think, 2008, that loan was factored to where it was gonna be funded by privilege fees only. No betterments, privilege fees only. And one of the first, I think probably 65% of it, day one, was covered by a large property here in the center of town. And then I know that we're a little bit deficient on that. Remember, Steve, we've talked about this as far as the privilege fees on that loan? Steve? Because we've asked for the town accountant to give us a balance of what is owed and the balance of what has come in, or what's been charged for privilege fees towards that. Because it was $2.5 million in 2009. That was the third phase of the treatment plant.
They have incurred a privilege fee twice for the initial build-out and then for the 100 cubic feet, or what, that was another sum of money that when they're looking for a build-out at that facility.
The first one was 1.7 million.
Right.
Right, so,
And-
and that 1.7 was going against the 2,495, and the commission at that time felt that with growth the way it was happening, that it would be easy to bridge the deficiency with privilege fees. Thus, whether you got Storts, or whether you got the treehouse, and, you know, whether you've got some housing projects going on, that's been chipping away at it. But I still think we're at a deficiency there.
Not to my
Anyways,
knowledge.
We can move on. So Doug, what you're telling us, there's gonna be a big retirement here come 2020, 21, as far as debt service goes.
According to the schedules I was provided, yes.
Okay.
And before Mrs. Walker retired for the second time, she made that very clear every time I met with her.
Yeah, yeah.
She gave me what the betterment and what the privilege fees were for fiscal 17 and fiscal 18. And then I estimated fiscal 19 and 20. She did not have
Okay.
those numbers.
Would you, if I may, would you recommend that we enforce that when a property gets sold, that this debt gets alienated right then and there versus carrying it over?
I've seen communities handle it both ways. It's up to the individual community whether when the property is sold, if the betterment moves with the property, or if it's terminated, it's paid off when the property is sold.
All right, look, now that you've looked at this, or maybe what you can do in your final study is maybe make a recommendation on that, one way or the other?
Yeah, I don't have the detail of how far the betterments go out, or what is owed on the betterment, or even what the balances are of the betterments. The town accountant did not have that information for me.
Okay.
That was something I asked.
Right, but based on sales, would it make sense that we would be better off to collect the money sooner rather than later?
That's always my belief, yes. But, again, it's a decision that has to be made by the town. If the numbers are working and there's enough revenue to fund the debt, then I think you keep it as is. But if it's not working,
Okay, but I think what you told us earlier, just this evening, that we've got a blowout here of over $300,000.
well, that's being funded through a general fund transfer. And Mrs. Walker stated that the agreement was, whatever the difference was, would be funded by the general fund. And she said that's just the agreement, and that's the premise that they've been operating under for the last X number of years, and I don't see that changing.
Okay, I'm having a hard time putting all that together. I'm sorry, but it seems like, so we're actually getting assistance from the general fund
You absolutely are getting assistance from the general fund every year, which is legal under enterprise. Enterprise states that your revenue should be primarily from rates and charges,
Right,
which it is. You're,
okay.
with a small system such as you have, this is very common. I worked in Plymouth, Mass, and they only had, I believe they had 5,000 accounts, and they had a $5 million budget. Half of it was debt, half of it was operating costs. Half of their budget was funded through the general fund to cover that debt. And the other, so all the other fees were covered through rates and charges. And that was just their decision. That's how they decide, instead of putting the entire cost of a sewer system on a very small number of customers, they decided that because the sewer system benefits the town as a whole, that the town should share, all townspeople should share in having a clean Plymouth Harbor and paying for that wastewater system.
Okay, good example.
So this is not uncommon. It's very common, especially in a small community. Okay, so if we go back to page 6, this is what I call the proof of revenue. So we'll start at the top and work our way down. So you have, there are roughly 340 customers that are on what I'm gonna call the meter method. That is, they have a water meter that revenue, and that's what we've been discussing for the last half hour or so. The general fund transfer, the privilege fees, the betterments, any transfer in retained earnings, that's all income that gets factored in and actually reduces how much you need to recover through the rates. We then have the pretreatment revenue. That's for the BODs, the nitrogen, the total suspended solids, how much money that's gonna bring in. And then you have your metered water. Even though it's sewer, I call it metered water because they're water meters. Roughly 6 million cubic feet at whatever, at the proposed rate. Add all those numbers together, and it should come out to, and it does come out to, how much you need to expend in revenue requirements in the future years. So 2.3 million in revenue, 2.3 million in expenses. Of course, that's not gonna happen, but on paper, the rates, as long as everything remains somewhat constant, you're gonna bring in roughly $2.3 million, hopefully a little bit more.
Do you have no questions, so Nancy?
Oh,
Sure.
go ahead.
So we already figured out '08 was the last rate increase. Is there anything that comes into play when you're doing your rate studies? How much the cost of doing business has gone up since in between rate increases?
Well, I base everything on current information. I don't look back.
Okay.
I mean, I will look back to see what's happened and, you know, I always look for other sources of revenue. What should you be charging for that you're not? What are you charging for that you're not charging enough for? In some cases, what are you charging? You know, you're charging too much for a certain service, and that would require adjustment. So we do look at the past, but we don't base the rates on what's happened in the past. We do have there's obviously reactions to what's occurred in the past. As you're spending down your retained earnings, we need to build that retained earnings
Right.
back up. So those actions definitely have an effect, but we don't incorporate them into the projections, per se. But the past definitely has an effect on the future. And,
doubt.
we're looking at a pretty hefty rate increase here, 25, 30%. What I would like to see moving forward is I would like to see a set of smaller increases each year as opposed to larger increases every however many years, whether it be 3 or 5 or 8 or 10. I just think it's more prudent. It makes for it's easier for you to administer. It's easier for the ratepayers to pay for. So, but that's water, pardon the pun, but it's water under the bridge. And I like to look back, but I don't like to dwell on the past. Let's make a plan for the future and build from there.
Doug, if we were to fast forward to the public hearing, which we're gonna have if we're gonna change a rate.
Mhm.
So one of the users comes up and says, well, you haven't had a rate change in 7 or 8 years. I look at the consumer price index, and that's gone up almost 13%. So if CPI has gone up 13%, why are you doubling that? Will be the question that the ratepayer is gonna ask.
Water and sewer expenses, based on my experience, don't increase at the consumer price index. They increase at a much higher level. Each year, there's more and more regulation put on you by local and federal government. There's chemical costs, electricity, costs a lot to run the plant. Capital increases by more than 1 or 2% each year. So there are a lot of numbers that go into this that really aren't driven by the consumer price index. Salaries maybe, a few other expenses, but look how electricity fluctuates. Look how the cost of oil. If we look at oil 5 years ago versus today, it's considerably more.
Actually, it's less than 5 years ago. It's less. Everyone will agree it's less.
Well, I meant 5 years was much more
Oh,
than
yeah,
today.
one time, yeah.
But that could change tomorrow.
No,
You
by
never
all-
know.
By all means. And
But capital, your debt service is what's driving your rates for at least the next few years.
correct.
And your costs are relatively stable. It's your debt and it's your capital. And you've been, it's really, the easiest way to describe it is you've been keeping your rates artificially low. You've avoided rate increases over the years by using your retained earnings to keep the rates lower than they should be. That's one of the other reasons that the rate increase is so much higher. You've been using for lack of a better term, your savings to keep the rates lower or avoid rate increases. So, that needs to stop because you're running out of retained earnings, and retained earnings should not be used to keep rates low. Retained earnings should really be used to fund capital. That's its primary goal.
And is there a rule of thumb of retained earnings relative to budget? What's a comfortable amount?
Well, it varies by community. You have a lot of capital that needs to be invested, and you're a very small firm, or you're a very small community with a very small customer base. If you have a major problem down at your plant, you could spend half your budget in a repair. So you're going to be, a community that's smaller is going to be required to have more money in retained earnings to guard against the unknown.
So there's no set,
There is no set amount.
no
The
set
Department of Revenue will not say,
okay.
You have too much or you have too little. They may come to you and question, why do you have so much? But if you have a plan, that's generally all they're looking for.
I know back in '08, 2009 when we were doing this, our cost to our customers, if you were to put it in fifth tiles, we were in the top fifth tile as far as cost goes to our customers.
Mhm.
And so what do we tell these customers when obviously, we're gonna be maintaining that? Or what do you see as far as, from what you're suggesting here, in relationship to other communities in similar in size?
I think your rates are pretty much on par with with other communities of this size. You're gonna have higher rates because you're a smaller community. I recently completed some rate work with Cherry Valley Sewer, and their rate is somewhere in the same vicinity as yours. And like you, they hadn't raised rates in many years. So they looked at a large rate increase. And smaller the community, the higher the rates is the general rule of thumb.
Okay. Again, you're talking economy on scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. You only have so many customers to spread the cost out over. And, you know, of the $2.3 million that you need to generate, roughly half of that comes from other sources other than the treatment of wastewater. You've got the retained earnings, the betterments, the
Yeah.
privilege fees, the general fund transfer, and any other fees that you charge. So, everything we've discussed tonight leads us back to the front page of the presentation. In Exhibit 1A, which is in the middle of the page, gives you a summary of the various rates and charges that you have now and what I'm proposing. So I'll just walk through those. So your unmetered services, those are your Title V consumers, currently have a per bedroom charge of $70 per bedroom. I'm recommending, and these are all quarterly rates, so 4 times a year. I'm recommending an increase of $20 per bedroom to $90, so from $70 to $90 per bedroom, per quarter. So it'll be $80 a year per bedroom. You have a 2-bedroom house, it's $160. You have a 3-bedroom house, it's $240.
Gotcha.
Okay, so for metered services, those are customers that actually have their sewer charges based on their water consumption. They have a two-tiered rate, for lack of a better term. They have what's known as a base charge, and that's a fee for those fixed costs that occur whether you use any water or not. So every quarter, the meter has to be read. The bill has to be generated. The money has to be collected. So it factors in your meter reading costs, your postage, your issuance fees, and then all the indirect costs for the support by the departments in the town. So that's, currently, that's a $30 charge per quarter. I'm not recommending an increase to that. That's a pretty solid number, and it's in line with other communities. So I would not recommend a change to that. Where the metered customers are gonna see a larger increase is gonna be through the metered charge. That is the amount of flow that goes through that meter. Currently, they pay 8 cents per cubic foot. I'm recommending that charge increase by 3 cents per cubic foot to 11 cents. And then for the MTA rates, and the MTA rates are currently for the 2 accounts out at the rest area. And the BOD rate is currently $3.28. I'm recommending an increase to $3.44. This is per pound. The nitrogen is currently at $4.29. I'm recommending an increase to $4.50. And the total suspended solids, current charge is $1.93. I'm recommending an increase to $2.03. So about a 5% increase to each of those different charges. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's a lesser increase because they are a metered account. So they're going to see a very large increase through the metered flow rate, but they're also going to see an increase, albeit a smaller increase, through the MTA rates. Now, what does all this mean? If we turn to page 3, this is what I call a impact analysis. What am I paying today? What am I going to pay tomorrow? Or what am I going to pay based on these recommended rates? So the first set of numbers are for those customers that have a water meter that determines what their charge is going to be. So if we get on the left-hand column, we have the cubic feet. So if we get down to 2,000, so it's 2,000 cubic feet. Currently, they pay $190 per quarter. Their bill, if they use the 2,000 cubic feet again, would increase to $250. That's a $60 increase per quarter. $240 per year, which is a lot of money. But if you take into consideration that you haven't raised your rates in 9 years and you annualize that increase, it's not that, it legitimizes it.
So
So-
that was on the Title V, right?
That, no, the Title V would be in the, right at the bottom of that display, down where the number of bedrooms are. So somebody who has a 2-bedroom home, they pay $140 currently. They would increase to $180. It's a difference of $40 per quarter. And that would be somewhere, they use somewhere around 1,200 cubic feet of water. So their increase would be in line with the metered account.
Question, Mr. Lemieux?
No, by all means, go ahead.
So if you do the math and you take the percentage difference and you kind of divide it by 8 or 9 years, you're talking like 3.5, 3.6?
Well, 8 goes into 35. 4 or 5% increase each year.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you annualize it, somewhere in that range. But I would like to state that moving forward, and I always look forward. If you go up 4% next year, and you go up 4% the year after, and you go up 4% the year after, that's a 12% increase. But really, it's more than that because you're compounding it. So if you waited to raise your rates for 3 or 4 years, you may have to go up 20%, whereas you're only going up 4, 4, and 4 over 3 years. So it definitely softens the blow for rate increases. Water rates used to be raised every 3 to 5 years, back before water became so expensive or sewer became so expensive. Now that the cost of treating the wastewater is so expensive, more frequent rate increases are necessary, and that's what most communities are doing. Very few communities raise their rates only every 3 to 5 years. It's mostly every year or every other year. And that's the direction I'd like to see you move in.
But you do agree, Doug, if we were to feather the rate, 4% is not the number, not based on what you're telling us
Not right
here.
now. Might be the number in 2 years from now, but it's not the number today. The number today is what you see in front of you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And I know you already said this, Doug, what's your rationale for the, on the surcharges? Why are you at that 5% or below. Because they're already paying more for
Because,
their
well,
regular
because
surge.
they're gonna be paying the increase in the flow rate from 8 cents to 11 cents,
Yeah,
plus the surcharge. So, the rest area right now, they use 1.3 million cubic feet. Their sewer bill right now is $104,000. It's gonna go to 142. That's per quarter. So they're seeing a significant
Yeah.
increase.
but they've seen surcharges of 140,000. in a
Right,
quarter.
but then you add their surcharge on top of that.
Right,
So they're gonna see a large percentage increase on the flow rate, and then they're gonna see a lesser increase, but yet still an increase on the surcharge, or on their surcharge.
okay.
It's kind of the perplexing thing about low flow plumbing. Increases all the concentrations, which increases the cost of treatment.
Mhm.
I'm going to suggest, Steve, that you go over these MTA rates for BOD and nitrogen and the TSS with Viola and relative to the chemical costs. Have them look at this as well. Second opinion?
Sure,
Yeah. Thank you. All right, Doug, so that's pretty much sums
Yes.
up your,
Yeah, it doesn't, sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But this is something that needs to be done. And it's really past due. It should have been done years ago. But, it's water under the bridge at this point, and we need to look forward and build a plan. We've depleted our retained earnings as low as we can, and we don't have that to fall back on any longer. You appropriated $500,000 at the last town meeting. You're not gonna have that kind of money next year. So, you're gonna have to find another source to pay for that, and that source are the rates, whether they be the Title V, or they be the surcharge, or whether it be the metered flow. But that's the real problem, that the retained earnings is down to a level where you don't have any more. You don't have the money to spend to keep the rates low. I would recommend that you not appropriate any money from retained earnings at next year's town meeting, the one in next May. Because you're gonna be at a level that you don't wanna go below, whatever that number be. It's gonna be in the $300,000 range someplace, but you don't wanna go any lower than that.
now Doug, this is considered a draft?
This is a draft.
Okay. Do you see any other work that you need to do to it?
I do not.
You do not? Okay.
These
I
are the numbers that I'm recommending. Should you choose to vote a lower rate, that is your prerogative as a board, but I am not gonna change these numbers from my report. The numbers are what they are, and this is, in my opinion, and what you paid me for is what you need to charge. So,
Okay. And being myself, the number that I don't agree with is your estimate, the one estimate.
unfortunately, the estimate doesn't even impact
No.
the rates. It's just,
Right.
it's just a number at this point.
It's just a number, and the thing is that we've been living with a sizable cushion for many years.
Correct.
And what has happened is, over the years, that whether it's $75,000, $85,000, $100,000 a year, we've chipped away at that cushion.
Yes,
Yeah, and I think the cushion is,
more rapidly in recent years than in
Yeah.
prior years.
so, Steve,
The goal is to move that cushion, make it larger, not make it smaller.
within reason and
Within
not
reason.
bleed our ratepayers. We
Correct.
want
We
be
have
as
to
fair
find
as
that,
possible.
we have to find that sweet spot where
Exactly,
we
agreed.
increase it each year, but we don't apply too much pressure on the ratepayers.
Steve?
The question I have is there any way you can think of to include a cost, a rate for technology changes? Perfect example is the last time we had a permit, they talked about a total nitrogen requirement, which got deflected. But it's a very real possibility that it's going to happen. If we end up with a nitrogen limit and a nitrogen removal, we are in a desperate situation due to
Capital
cost.
expense.
Exactly.
You would need to raise the rate.
Well,
To cover
okay,
that.
But is there any methodology that you have seen or know about where they have a technology increase base so that we're putting money in a savings account to?
Oh, you could, as a board, I believe it's within your power that you could vote to create, would be segregated
Okay.
into a special
Okay.
account. You don't need to create a new bank account or anything like that. But 1 penny of everything,
Yep.
of all metered flow, would then would be allocated to a special account, and it would have its own balance, much like a system development charge. That doesn't go into the calculation of the rates, but it sits out there and you use it for a specific purpose. It would need to be voted by the board to fund whatever nitrogen removal there are. But you'd have to work all that out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, we're good. I think, what's in order is that, unless we want to wait for a full board, but it's soon, as we have done in the past, we need to come up with a specific date from when we're going to have a rate increase hearing. And I believe you've already gone through that, what the required process is, Steve?
We haven't gone through it, we have to go through it to
I
do
believe you-
Hearing or a notification?
all the above.
Yeah, again, I think you've already checked this out, Steve.
Yes.
What's required
Yes,
by law that this
yes,
department needs to do,
yes.
to have a public hearing, and then we close the hearing, and then we can make a decision.
Is that in your bylaws? It's not a state law.
Right.
It would strictly be if your bylaws require a,
Well, I have
public
seen,
hearing.
we have had a policy, I'll have to go back and look for it, that, and I believe what it was is advertising in 3 newspapers, a 2-week lead time. And then
That's the notification process.
yes,
And I think that's all that's required at the state level.
Right.
There's no hearing required or public hearing.
right. It's just-
simple majority
Simple
vote,
Right.
Yes,
I believe by the board is all that's needed to approve the rates.
And it can go out in
Yes.
flyers at that point.
But
yes.
if I may, Doug, don't we have to have at an open meeting,
No.
This is an open meeting.
but no, at an open meeting that we've invited people to come in and discuss what we were considering on doing?
No, I don't believe so. You could open the meeting up while I'm here today, and they could ask questions, but
Does that go both for water and sewer?
it all depends on what your bylaws are.
Okay, and I'm just switching over to, I know with the town of Southbridge, they have a public,
They have to have I do the rates in Southbridge,
Right.
and there has to be a public hearing. That's part of their,
and do they also have to notify their users that they're gonna have that public hearing? Or does it just have to do it in the newspaper?
it's a public meeting, has to be posted so many days in advance,
Okay,
and,
but the notice don't go out
But
to
that's
each
a
individual
Southbridge.
users?
no,
Right,
That's a Southbridge bylaw,
that's a Southbridge
not
bylaw.
state law.
Yeah, there's no state law requiring a public hearing.
okay.
All depends on the town. Some towns have them, some towns don't.
All right, so
But
it's-
I believe you could vote these rates tonight if you wanted.
Steve, could you just check that out further as far
Yeah.
as our own regulations? And then, let's make that an agenda item for next meeting. But also make sure that you follow up with Viola on that other thing. Those,
Yes, yes.
okay? All right, Doug.
Okay, and then I'm working on the, with the water department as well, on a project with them.
No, what are you doing for,
Oh,
on the west side?
it's a multi, goal project. I'm looking at various scenarios, about if you purchase water wholesale from
Southbridge?
Southbridge, and if you created your own water department, if you, as opposed to having Southbridge do everything for you. So just a number of different scenarios to determine what's going to be in the best interest, both short-term and long-term, for the town.
Okay, so Doug, you've been contracted?
Yes,
Okay, and you have a contract
I do.
and signed by,
Town administrator.
okay, but nothing from this board, though?
You voted at last meeting.
Last meeting, we voted for it, right?
Correct.
I don't recall the vote.
Last meeting?
Last meeting, we voted for it.
I don't recall the vote so the vote included to have, is it Pioneer Consulting?
Pioneer Consulting,
Pioneer
yes.
Consulting to do the water study? Okay. No, try to find that for me. Okay, Doug, go ahead, continue, because
So,
that's part of our agenda item.
I don't have the proposal with me. But basically, it's looking at different scenarios involving, I think the goal, I don't want to say the goal, but part of the analysis will be to see if it's more cost-efficient for Charlton to run their own water department and purchase the water from Southbridge's wholesale customer, and kind of wean yourself away from them and run your own department. So just coming up with a number of different cost analyses and different scenarios of what it's going to cost to produce your, for example, to produce your own water, if you wanted to look at developing wells and building your system that way, or if you want to continue to purchase water from Southbridge, or if you want to just continue as is and have Southbridge handle everything. So just looking at different factors that would essentially put the water department in your own hands.
As I recall the scope of work, I think there were 3 analyses, and the first 2 analyses were full-time employee doing this. Second one was full-time employee doing this. And I think
And
the
then
third one.
contract ops,
Hmm?
contract operations, if
Right.
you're.
Oh, the third one was contract.
Right.
Right, I guess my question would be is maybe a fourth option would be the consideration of whether a full-time operator is needed at the time.
Okay.
Because I think,
I'm okay with changing things up as we go along. I'm a small firm.
Yeah.
And my goal here is to give you whatever information you need to make a decision that's going to be in your best interest. So, I have no problem changing things on the fly as we're going along, or adding another step. It's not going to change the price of the study or anything like that. I
Right.
just don't work that way.
and do you have the 2 quarters of water bills from Southbridge?
Not yet. I have
Not
not
yet.
started.
Okay,
My efforts have been focused on sewer.
and so, good enough.
Question, Ms.
Sure,
Williams?
go right ahead, Jen.
So, to go back to your second to last comment, so are you asking him, to do another, instead of the 3 studies that are out there without a full-time inspector? Like, I,
No, not inspector, we're talking about I believe that what I had read about what I thought was a proposal is that he would be giving us a rate based on certain expenses. those expenses were predicated on the fact of 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 included a full-time operator, 3 was contract service.
Correct.
So I was saying to myself, geez, if we've only got 180 or 190 customers, do we need a full-time operator?
I can incorporate that, that's not.
That's what I was
Yeah,
saying.
no problem.
Where was the three things that you're referring to that you saw?
It was in
There were
this-
3
in the
objectives
proposal.
laid out in the proposal.
A few minutes ago, you didn't even realize we voted on this last.
I knew there was a proposal, I didn't know there was a vote. I knew there was a proposal, I remember seeing the proposal, but I don't remember the vote.
Did we all see the proposal?
Did we what?
I remember voting on it, I didn't.
Well, I don't
recall
remember voting on it. Okay,
seeing- I
unless,
didn't remember seeing a proposal.
I can clarify if you'd like.
that's okay. That's
I-
okay.
I would-
We'll wait for the minutes.
No, I'd like to
I-
hear from Ms. Graber.
Well, I'm the chair,
I-
we're not gonna, we're all set.
I would like to make a motion to hear from Ms. Craven, please.
I'm sorry, I'm the chairman, I have to control the agenda. She's not
I
on the
have a
agenda.
motion on the floor.
Sorry.
I have,
second it.
So Norma,
there's a motion
you're
and a
gonna-
second,
you're
Mr.
gonna
Chair.
research the minutes to see if in fact there was a vote. So, and again, if you have a signed contract, then we'll
Rob, there's a
we'll
motion
deal
and a
with that.
second.
Again, I'm not accepting the motion because it's not a subject that's on the agenda.
You brought it up, though,
What do you
Mr.
mean?
Chair.
It's within the
I'm sorry,
realm
I'm
of
not
the
accepting
agenda
it.
of water topic.
Mr. Chair, I believe that you're out of order.
Well, maybe, but again, I'm not accepting it, so.
No choice.
Okay.
And Doug, do you have something else to add as far as talking about the water and?
I do not.
possible? No. And part of that, you will be conversing with Southbridge?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Any other questions? for,
I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting. Since the motion was made and seconded and refused to be heard, I don't think that the fair voice from the majority or the 2 out of the 3 people that voted for the motion are being heard, and
It was, you're out of order. We haven't finished the agenda. We need to finish the agenda, and then we can call for adjournment.
so you're just gonna let that drop? Like, we can't discuss it or hear it, and we might be able to solve the problem now?
Again, I'm just saying, as I'm acting chairman, I'm saying I'm not accepting that. That's all. That's why I have that option.
I don't think that you can.
Well, it's okay, then find
Well,
out.
no, if we go by Robert's rules, I'm
Well,
sorry.
again, it's,
I would like to table this issue
yeah,
until
Doug,
further in the evening.
Doug, we're all set? You're all set?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Okay,
you're shutting me
nothing else.
off. Mr. Chair,
Under the
excuse me.
agenda
No,
items.
excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Okay. There was a motion and a second.
Right.
That means that we have a discussion.
I didn't accept the motion because
But-
it's not relative to the agenda.
It was relative to the water
I'm sorry,
conversation.
I'm sorry. We're moving on to beta plan review. Steve, what's with the beta plan review?
It was requested by the chair that it be added to the agenda to see if there was any mention within that of water rate studies.
And the finding was,
I didn't find any.
and then I looked as well, there was no mention as far as beta doing the water study,
Correct.
which, if I may, Doug, did you see the scope of work that beta is doing?
I have not.
Okay, then I'll let you take this and share with it, just so that we don't have any overlapping, because there's quite a few items that they're doing relative to water.
I know Beta. I've worked.
Oh, yeah, no, again, I'm sure you can work well. The thing is just want to make sure that if they're doing it, we don't need to be redundant,
Mr. Chair?
okay? Okay,
Mr. Chair. I'd like to, I'm in Robert's Rules of Order, Article 2, Classification of Motions, under 8, Incidental Motions. Incidental motions are motions that arise out of other motions and consequently must usually be decided before the motions that give rise to them. They are subsequently related to the other motions and may arise for a relatively minor reason, such as some detail of the method of considering another motion. Thus, they are aptly called incidental. They yield to privileged motions except when they arrive at a privileged motions. Usually they cannot be debated or amended, and they have no fixed order of precedence. They take their rank from the motion out of which they arise. And then go from there.
Well,
Non-agenda item,
going by that, Rob,
Yeah.
not an agenda item, as chair last week, I recognized your motion as a non-agenda item and accepted it.
Yep.
Just so you're aware.
no, right, and you gave me the floor.
That's right.
Right, right. Are we all done with Beta? So that's it? He has the information? So according to the agenda, any new business, and I see nothing on here?
I'd like to bring up new business. I would like to see if Mrs. Craven can enlighten us on what she does know about the situation we just talked about, and that is new business.
But it's not on the agenda.
New business is new business,
It's not on the agenda.
but new
But
business is
since
new
it's not on the
business.
agenda, we can't accept it.
So what is new business?
Usually, again, it's just an item that's listed here, but there's nothing under it.
Right, so we just list new business, and then if we have new business that comes
Well,
up
again,
when
if
it's,
it's new business, it has to be posted so that everyone will know what we're gonna be discussing on the new business. And since there's no mention here, then it's not new business.
Mr. Lemansky,
So-
I disagree. I
Okay, that's
feel
fine,
that this
that's
is
fine,
a
that's
stalemate.
fine.
This is,
That's fine.
New business.
A motion to adjourn?
No. Push the motion. He's out of order. Needs to resign.
I make a motion to continue the discussion on the information that Ms. Craven has. I can stay here all night.
I'll second it.
Not on the agenda,
It's under new business.
unaccepted.
Simply resign.
Sample agenda, Robert's Rules of Order, page 84. New business, new motions on elections, on computer purchases, other new motions.
You're out of order, not
You're out
recommendation.
of order.
Based on the agenda item, the meeting was supposed to close at 8:30.
We went well past that, one time.
Well, I'm gonna say, but I'm just saying, is, the meeting needs to close.
Mr. Chair?
Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Mr. Chair, many times have our meetings gone past 8:30, and many times have they not started at 6:30.
But
So if
we have no other business that's on the agenda.
it's new business, and there's a
There-
motion on the
There's no
floor.
there's no listed new business on the agenda. You've seen it, it's right here.
But it pertains to the subject we were talking about, and we have an expert that's here and somebody who can comment on it. But what you're doing is postponing this vote and delaying this, and from what it appears, because you kept throwing out 2008, 2009, you've been continuing this process for a long time, and we need to move forward. We have due diligence to this community.
If this is what you want to do, then you get a motion. Did you second it?
I did.
So Ms. Craven's going to come up, and what is she going to talk about? What is
The
she gonna ta-
information
whoa,
that she had
what is
that
she
would
gonna- what is-
enlighten us to, well, I
on
would
what-
have to
on
go
what?
back to.
What's the subject?
The water rate proposal.
The,
The water
to
rate,
give her permission
You brought
to,
up three things
the water rate, the three items that were listed.
on the proposal.
Yes.
You added a fourth to it. As much as I remember the vote last week
Yeah, yeah.
to do that, I do not recall seeing a proposal. Ms. Craven was gonna enlighten us on the proposal.
The proposal with the three items?
Yes.
Then, if we have a motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Then fine, Ms. Craven, you can now come up. Which, again, I think that the meeting's out of order, but that's okay.
Duly noted.
thank you for your comments.
Evening, Ms. Craven. How are
Good
you?
evening. That
the longest introduction I think I've ever gotten here. And I'm not surprised. So what I did want to come up to say was, when Mr. Lemansky had said that he didn't know about the water rate study, and actually sounded like he had made some kind of comment that I had signed it without permission by the
I
board.
didn't say that. Don't say something that
So
that
that
you
was,
think you're, excuse me.
that was
Stop,
the way it landed
stop.
for
Well,
me.
what you thought happened didn't happen. Play that back. I did not say that. So don't put words out there that weren't said.
Let me rephrase that
Please-
then, to
please
be
do.
more accurate.
Yes.
I believe that you said that Mrs. Cray, who signed it? And then
Who
you
signed
said
the con, I asked,
you
I
had no
asked,
idea.
I asked
So
Mr. Gardner,
I-
who signed the contract?
I'm trying to explain something to you. So I did look back in my emails just to make sure that the board was fully aware. And in your last meeting, you did vote to move forward with the water rate study. Later the next day, July 25th, I sent to the board, hi, as discussed, when we were informed that we might lose the $200,000 if we didn't use it by August, the commission asked that I find ways to secure the funds. One of the tasks left to do was the water rate study. It is my understanding that the Water Sewer Commission was awaiting Beta's study to be completed before moving forward. We were never told there was a time limit on the funds. Please see the below email string, helps to read from the bottom. You have a water rate study contracted with your consultant who is doing the sewer rate study, and it is already approved by the state to be covered by the grant. Attached is the approved proposal. You also questioned Beta's scope, as you did not remember what you had contracted for. I attached what I have in my records for your review. Please let me know if you have any questions. And this email had the proposal and other information, and it went to all of the board members, including Mr. Lemansky. So I just wanted to come up and remind you that you actually do have it in your July 25th email, and it would save Norma the time of trying to look it up and send it to you.
That's- yeah. Any other questions for Ms. Craver?
Thank you. I must have overlooked that. I do recall seeing the email.
I do have the email pulled up, and
Right.
that is exactly as read.
Thank you.
But before you leave, Ms. Craver, is at the last meeting that you were present, and I know when you sat down, you had mentioned the fact that there was a water study contract, and my ears perked up because I said to myself, I don't remember voting on a contract. Then, in fact, I brought the point up, I thought I brought the point up, is we need to protect the funds that have been provided to us by the state. And it was discussed that we needed to get this water rate study completed. And I don't remember a specific vote or a motion or a second. There was a consensus, yes, we need to get the study done. But at that meeting, did you mention Pioneer was the consultant company doing the water rate study? You
Yes,
mentioned
as a
those
matter of
words.
fact, I went back to my office, I got the proposal, and I read the
No,
three.
no, at our meeting,
Types.
last meeting that we had, last
Yep.
Monday night, did you state
Yes,
that Pioneer Consulting was going to be doing our water rate study?
I stated, I'm not sure if I said Pioneer, but I did state that the same consultant you were using for the sewer was doing your water rate, because, and that seemed to make sense, because you already had a relationship with him.
And
So I'm not sure what you're asking,
Well,
but I was
I'm-
pretty clear
okay,
that
well-
that was who it was.
it could be my recall. I believe that, and again, I'm not looking to be combatant here or
That's
to
a
be
little late.
negative about this, but I believe the way that it was stated was that, you talked about the need to do this contract. You talked about who was doing our sewer contract, but no way during that meeting was it implied that this was already a done deal and it was signed.
No, actually, it was. I did
Okay,
state
so
that
if
at
it
the
was,
meeting.
so if it was.
And I told you, and you actually asked me to send you the proposal, which I did the
Okay.
next day. And it was you that had requested it.
So there's a difference between a proposal and a contract. That's why I asked for the proposal. I didn't
It
say,
was a
could you send me the contract? So if in fact at the last meeting, it was already contracted, then if we voted on this last meeting, how could you say that it's already been done, as if it was done in the past? Because the date
I
that,
don't know what you,
the
I
date that
have no
signed,
idea what you're saying.
the contract that was signed with Pioneer,
Mhm.
I believe it has a date on it.
Mhm.
Is that date last Monday?
No. As you know, when I spoke with you last week, and I told you, which I reiterated in the email, that you were about to lose your grant money. And you had said to me several meetings ago, do what you can to use up that grant money and secure it. And one of the things that you needed to do was the rate study.
So are
So
you-
I was
you're
authorized to move forward with that.
You were
And I'm
authorized
sorry you
by
don't remember.
individuals or
No,
by
this
the group?
board.
Oh, well,
By the
I thought the
board.
board authorized you last Monday night. That's what you just
This
said.
is a month ago when I told you that you were going to
All
lose
right, so
your.
Norma, you can find that where the
Norm,
board, not
you-
last Monday, but before that, to where the board authorized going forward with the rate study.
This goes back
Being done
prior to
with
the
Pioneer.
fiscal ending.
It was not about Pioneer. It was about telling you that you were gonna lose your grant money and having this
I
board
understand
tell
all
me
that.
to do
I
what I
understand that.
could to
But-
secure it.
But the,
What are you looking
please,
for,
please,
So
you're interrupting. But the
Pioneer was only
specific
discussed last
act
week.
Of contracting, the specific act of contracting.
Right, that was told to you, you were informed
Oh, we were
last
told,
week.
we were told. So we
that
have nothing to
we
do
had
with the
gotten it.
contracts, Robin?
Mr.
so we're
Lemansky,
being-
you
we're
had
being
asked
told by
me
you?
already to get your rate, to
I
get the
can't
things
ask you.
done.
I can't ask you. The commissioner's gotta ask you.
Mr. Lemansky, this commission voted on exactly all the duties and tasks that you wanted done within the grant. You had someone that was putting that all together, and you let him go. Then I came to you and said, you're gonna lose this $200,000. You, as a commission, said to me, do what you can to get the money secured,
Right, and that's
which
when
is
we
what I
hired people
did.
like Beta. We
So-
signed the contract with Beta.
No, this is
long
way
after
after.
Beta's
Please,
contract
you're
was
interrupting.
signed.
He's
Well, no,
correct. You're not gonna listen to him now? He was the chairperson.
We're having the discussion here.
I
I'm
think
trying to get to the
I'm-
bottom.
I am
of-
actually
of who-
answering to the whole commission,
who-
not just you.
Of when that contract was signed and who gave you the authority to sign on our behalf.
The board did.
That's all, not much.
The commission did.
The
commission
had-
asked-
But how many times,
The
how many more
commission
times do you want Robin to say
during a
it?
meeting
Do you know-
had a vote of the board.
Mr. Lemansky, it appears that you've been quite satisfied over the years by giving me general direction. And in this moment, it appears that you're trying to change it now to a micro
No.
direction that you did not give me.
There's
So
difference
over the
between
years, you
signing
have been
checks,
giving me,
Committing contracts versus saying, well, do your best and try to get this done. But when it comes time to spend money, allocate money and do contracts, is just like what we've done in the past when Alex was chairman. We gave him the ability to sign contracts on our behalf of specific things.
Mr.
And have
Lemansky,
we
you've
given-
already
have we given
voted
you
on the
that
scope.
ability? Have we given you that
You
ability?
have already voted on the scope. Yes, I think that you did.
I could be, Robin, I could be mistaken. And if I'm mistaken, I apologize. But Norman's going
And
to find this in the back
again,
pages.
you have given me certain responsibilities and requested my assistance in areas, and you do not go to the micro level. When you tell me to make sure I can secure that money and get your tasks done that you've already voted to approve and that you've wanted, and you've had hours of talking about this water rate study and how to get your consecutive water system and get the information you need to go along with the master plan, I take that as, Robin, get this done. Now, if you would like me to bring every contract back to you for approval, I would be glad to do that.
And again,
But I've
that's
never
fine.
been asked to do that
I
before.
don't know of any contracts that we've engaged in to where we haven't been a part of the vote.
Mr.
for-
Lemansky, you
for items
authorized
over
me to
$2,000.
administer the grants. You authorized me to administer the grants, you authorized me to do the contracting. If you would like to change that, I would be glad to bring all that information back to you, and you can start administering the grants.
Yeah.
I would be perfectly happy.
Administrating versus approving are two different things.
Administrating is getting the work done,
Yeah.
and you've already approved the work.
I'm all set. Anyone have any more questions from Ms. Craver?
Yeah, I do. As far as contracts go, Robin, anything that's put out the bid has to be signed by the procurement officer anyway, right?
Yes, sir.
Not the board.
No.
Well, it would depend. But again, I am operating from from the
Understood.
understanding that you have made a request for me to do this work. If I'm taking liberties and I'm doing more than you would like, please let me know, and I will step back and you can take over the grants. I have no problem with that. Done?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug, no bearing on you yourself. Okay.
I don't take
Don't take any offense to that. Seeing we have no more business for the evening, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn. Next meeting, 7th of August, 2017, here at the Town Hall, 6:30.
Do I hear a second?
Second, we start at 6:30.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.